Welcome to The Beat. I'm Jason Johnson in for Ari Melber. We begin with a stunning new report about Donald Trump's authoritarian assault on American cities. The Washington Post reporting on plans from the Pentagon to create a, quote, domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force in cities facing protests or other unrest. According to the Post, who viewed this plan, if adopted, it would require 600 troops to be ready round the clock to deploy in as little as 1 hour. This as members of the National Guard report to Washington, D.C. to facilitate Trump's authoritarian takeover of our capital city. Attorney General Pam Bondi meeting today with D.C.'s mayor as she assumes control of the D.C. police for at least the next 30 days. Meanwhile, actual residents of D.C. who only have a single non-voting representative in Congress have been out in the streets protesting this takeover.
The whole idea that there is some kind of a crisis of disorder in D.C. is a made-up, phony story to distract attention from deteriorating economy, from the ICE raids, which horrify even people who wanted action on immigration, and of course from the Epstein files. I think this administration would like to take over not only D.C., but any state or jurisdiction that doesn't completely bend the knee.
The conservative-leaning Wall Street Journal is even calling Trump's latest escalation, quote, his boldest move to date to expand the use of military power on U.S. soil. As the AP reports, Trump's targeting of D.C. and his rhetoric around it echoes a long and ugly history of racism towards majority black cities in America. Lawmakers and experts are sounding the alarm about both the authoritarianism and the racial undertones of Trump's latest actions.
He's doing the dictator playbook again, just like he did in LA.
He does this with black mayors.
Yes.
Whether it's Baltimore, LA, New York.
It is the reincarnation of George Wallace, of Huey Long, of the disgusting policies of the past.
He really enjoys using U.S. military force against American civilians on American soil and wants any excuse to do it anywhere he can.
This is part of the very dangerous slide towards authoritarianism.
It's not a slide. We might be there. Joining me now is Rick Wilson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and Joyce Vance, former federal prosecutor and law professor at the University of Alabama. Rick, I'll start with you. Clearly, this is an authoritarian move by the President of the United States. But from your perspective, is this just another power grab from Trump, or is this just a distraction from other things that are wrong in the administration? Which do you think is the primary motivation here?
You know, Michael Wolff and others have reported in the last few days, Donald Trump kept saying, I want something big. I want something big. I need a distraction. And this is a pretty big distraction. I believe that Donald Trump both loves authoritarianism, loves the use of the military against American citizens, and needs a distraction. But this has a side benefit to reassemble some of the cohesiveness of the Republican base that has been shattered by Epstein, because it's not all of them, but a meaningful fraction of his base voters will be happy to watch video of young black men being arrested and chained hand and foot in the streets. That is what Trump's feral sense of his own base will lead him to do. And again, it's not every Republican in the country, but there are a lot of them in his base who have been very disappointed about the Epstein matter, and this is a way for him to bring them back home.
Joyce, I want to play some sound from Maddow last night, just talking about Trump's authoritarianism, and get your thoughts on the other side.
He wants U.S. military force deployed on U.S. soil facing inward as a show of force to the American people about what he and the government can do to you. And we clearly are now in the part of the attempted authoritarian takeover where our authoritarian leader just starts trying to turn our own military to face us, the people of this country.
Joyce, I read your Substack article, which was very informative about what the laws are at play here. So tell us a little bit about a very important ruling that's going to happen this week that could have a huge impact on the ability of Donald Trump to do the kinds of things that he did in L.A. And what he's attempting to do right now in Washington, D.C.
Right. It's a complicated issue because what Trump is doing in the District of Columbia depends on special circumstances there. His ability as president to take control of the police force, the control he already has over the National Guard. If he'd like to go into other states, he faces that same problem he faced in Los Angeles, which is the Posse Comitatus Act, the prohibition on the use of the military for domestic law enforcement. And that's what Rachel's talking about when she says turning the military inward, right? We're talking about Donald Trump saying to Americans through the creation of this proposed rapid response force, through any sort of deployment of the military, he's saying to American citizens, I can bring you to heel. I can make you behave if you step out of line. It's threat, it's intimidation. It's very clear what he's doing here. In California, there's a trial. I don't know that we'll get a ruling this week, Jason, but the ultimate issue there is whether Trump crossed the line in Los Angeles and used military folks who were deployed there, the National Guard folks, for improper purposes under Posse Comitatus.
Rick, this authoritarianism is taking the form of the military. It's taken a form of threats against media companies. It's taken a form of threats against universities. But I want to talk a little bit about something that we used to all share, more or less agree on, which is Trump's interference with the Smithsonian. We're now in a situation where it looks like the White House is about to vet Smithsonian museums to fit Trump's historical vision. I, as a college professor and someone who enjoyed many opportunities to go see free museums when I was a kid in Washington, D.C., am disturbed by this, not just for what it means now, but what it means down the road. Talk just a little bit about the danger of a president who has the time to start monkeying around with what we have in national museums that tell our nation's history.
Authoritarians rely on rewriting history in their image. They rely on reshaping what were common facts among everyone into a narrow cast version of themselves. This would be enormously familiar to anyone in North Korea. This would be familiar to anyone in communist China. This is the same sort of revisionist history where Donald Trump is going to go in, and I won't doubt that by the time he's done, there will be no reference to any African American in the Smithsonian who has accomplished anything in this country. This is a through line, again, that pleases a part of his base that are the people who are addicted to the culture war outrage all the time. They're addicted to the constant idea that there's this woke conspiracy trying to oppress, the long put upon white male. This is a transparent and shallow attempt at this, but it is exactly out of the dictator's playbook. It whitewashes history. It erases history. It makes history into something that is an ideological moment that is reshaped by the desires of one man. It's sick and it's wrong, but it's very much on brand for Trump's authoritarian wannabe status.
Joyce, I want to move back to the sort of city at large as opposed to just its museums. We're going to have 30 days of the president of the United States or whoever happens to be under him controlling the police in the city. Okay, fine. What happens after the 30 days? Does that mean that these troops will now leave? Does that mean that, the city at that point will sue and tell them they have to go? We don't have enough room or space for them. What could potentially happen after these 30 days? Or could this be a situation where the president just keeps extending this out and out and out and out and out as a test case for what he might do somewhere else?
So the D.C. Code home rule gives Trump 30 days. And after that, if he wants to continue with this sort of expanded control of law enforcement in the city, he needs permission from Congress. I'm not certain about very many things in Congress these days, but I feel pretty good that Democrats could mount a filibuster to keep that sort of a measure from passing. So I think it's very unlikely he'll get that. And the question becomes, what does he do at the end of the 30 days? Maybe Rick is right and he's had his big distraction and Epstein is no longer on people's minds and he doesn't need to go forward. But if he needs it, this is a president who has used power in unprecedented ways, who has reread our laws and sort of tortured them into a shape that I think the people who passed them did not intend. So the question will become, will he push the issue and try to keep control based on these utterly bogus claims of rampant crime, which, we all know wrong. Statistics don't bear it out. DOJ numbers say he's wrong, but he may well push past 30 days.
Rick Wilson, Joyce Vance, thank you so much for starting us off the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, why experts are worried that Trump is trying to hide the truth about all of our economies. But first, the GOP lawmaker gets an earful as he defends his support for Trump.
I want to know why you support Big Orange Man and his big ugly bill and voted for it.
There's not cuts for Medicaid, it's not Medicare.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is our special guest. We are back in just 90 seconds. Republicans have officially entered the find out stage of the second Trump presidency. Republican Congressman Doug LaMalfa of California getting grilled so hard they were calling him foreman by the end of that town hall. Attendees were holding his feet to the fire on Monday for supporting Trump's very unpopular agenda.
I want to know why you support the Big Orange Man and his big ugly bill and voted for it.
There's not cuts for Medicaid, it's not Medicare. People that really do need it and are eligible under the program, they're not being cut. And the hospital
You have taken money out of poor people's pockets. Your party are actively bringing people
to get on there.
We vote, but we will hold you accountable.
It started as a town hall in California. Today, it's national headlines. It's why GOP leaders urged lawmakers and their party to skip town hall events earlier this year amid a wave of angry backlash over Trump's policies. The backlash escalating over what's happening in D.C. and in voters' hometowns. In San Diego, a married couple that backed Trump in 2020 and 2024 say they now regret their votes after experiencing, quote, racial profiling by Border Patrol officers.
George and his wife Esmeralda say an unmarked SUV started following them and pulled them over. They say Border Patrol agents first approached wearing masks.
Why are we not allowed to be here? Because we're not white?
George and Esmeralda both voted for the first time in 2020 and again in 2024 for President Donald Trump. As they see his immigration crackdown, do you regret your vote?
Yes, I do. Very much so. I feel shame, guilt, and anger at the same time.
Joining me now to discuss is Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, representing Texas's 30th District. Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for joining me this evening. I'm wearing my Cowboys colors for the district to make everything work better. We'll start with this. As someone who is out talking to the people on a regular basis, when you see a fellow member of Congress get just raked over the coals like this, is that a reflection of their lack of communication? Is it just holding on to bad policies? How do things like this end up happening to members of Congress?
Yeah, well, first of all, they've decided that they're not wanting to listen to their constituents. Instead, they focused in on doing whatever the nonsense that is coming out of the White House dictates needs to happen. And I think that that's one of the reasons that, he's decided, let me go and let me mix up the maps as it relates to redistricting, because these policies are not popular. They're not popular with Democrats, for sure. They're definitely not popular with independents. And frankly, Republicans are getting upset as well. When you decide that you want to cut health care from 17 million people in this country, I can guarantee you that they're not all members of the Democratic Party. When you know that you are going to pull out $1 trillion out of the healthcare system, and therefore everyone's healthcare is going to go up, then that's what we're going to see.
And that kind of representation that you're talking about is important, right? People want someone in Congress who's speaking for them. When you're traveling around Texas, when you're home, when you're at your desk in other parts of the states, what are Texas residents saying about Abbott's attempt to redistrict? Are people still being informed? Is anybody there who doesn't know? Or are people sort of screaming to you and Democratic leadership for help?
Yeah, no, the people in Texas are not happy. Obviously, we know that they had these hearings where they went around and, of course, did not offer a map. And then by the time they offered a map, they only gave people 48 hours notice to then show up on a workday in Austin to testify because they did not want to hear from them. Well over 400 people signed up to testify against the bill, and maybe about 20 signed up to support the bill. So listen, we know that these lawmakers are not listening to the people. Instead, they are doing whatever Trump and Abbott tell them to do. And I think that there is going to be a reckoning. If we harken back to 2018, we know that we saw waves everywhere. I think that the backlash is going to be even bigger.
I had a conversation with several people who were involved intimately in Texas, and one person told me that there were members of Congress who literally got calls from the state to confirm their home addresses in order to guarantee that they were being drawn out of their own districts. Can you confirm, did you receive one of those calls, or have you talked to other colleagues who had a similar experience?
Yeah, so it actually wasn't a call. So when I testified in Austin, I talked about the fact that they confirmed our address. So they sent us a form via email. And then at that point in time, they said, confirm that this is your current residence as well as your census block. I then sent that back in, and then I asked them to confirm receipt, which they did, yet they consistently moved us out of our districts.
Former Obama Attorney General Eric Holder has said he's going to meet with House Dems tomorrow to discuss Texas redistricting. Obviously, I can't know all the inside strategy that you're going to be engaging in, but what do you want Eric Holder to do, or what's a way that he can actually help you all in this battle in Texas before this sort of anti-democratic cancer spreads throughout the rest of the country?
Yeah, I think that what we've got to do is make sure that people understand what laws are left on the books and make sure that they know that Texas qualifies as it relates to racial gerrymandering. While he said he wanted 5 seats, he didn't necessarily say he wants 5 black seats, but basically that's what it's kind of turning into, is get rid of all of the black and brown representation. As we see that this cancer is trying to infect the entire country, they're talking about going after Jim Clyburn in South Carolina, a Section 2 seat. They're talking about going after Andre Carson in Indiana. They're talking about going after Amelia Sykes in Ohio. They're talking about going after Reverend Cleaver in Missouri. They went after 3 out of 4 black seats as it relates to Texas. So when I do the math, at a very minimum, we're looking at losing almost 7 members or more of the Black Caucus. And that's not talking about what Florida is planning to do, because Florida is moving forward. So you tell me what it is if it ain't race.
Seems pretty obvious to me. But then again, that's the problem that we're dealing with. So I want to ask you this. It's an important racial question. A lot of people who I've talked to in Texas have said, and I want you to either confirm or deny this is the case, that there is some tension within the Democrats who have left the state, that there seems to be a stronger coalition sometimes between black and white legislators, and that some of the Hispanic legislators have either stayed in the state or have been more likely to defect and go back. Is that true? Is there any sort of racial cleavage or tension in what you're seeing with the Democrats who've left the state, or is that just sort of an outside rumor?
I think that that's more so just kind of people making an observation. We know that there are no members of the Black Caucus that actually showed up to the floor. We can't say the same for members of the Hispanic caucus. So I think that that's where people are getting it from. But at the end of the day, there's still a larger consolidation of members, black, white, or brown, that have decided that they were going to leave the state. And so the vast majority have left. But I think that much like a lot of things that we see, even when we look at the numbers of who held down Kamala, regardless of the defections that they like to talk about, black folk have been the most solid voting bloc for the Democrats. We know that black folk come from a long history as it relates to the civil rights movement. Now, we can't get through any movement without allies for sure, but we know who was on the front lines of leading those movements. And so I do think that it hits a little harder when you know that people bled when they died, when you know that there were water hoses and dogs put on them. These are the images that are seared in our brains when we think through the history of what it took to get us here. And as only the 55th Black woman to ever be elected to the U.S. House, I can tell you that there is so much more work to do. But right now, they are trying to take us back to prior to LBJ signing the Voting Rights Act into law.
Congressman Jasmine Crockett, thank you so much for the work you do, and thanks for coming on The Beat tonight.
Absolutely.
Later this hour, Trump officials are already decimating FEMA. Their disturbing next steps are coming into focus. Plus, why Obama's history-making 2004 DNC speech is back in the news tonight. But first, critics warning a, quote, MAGA partisan handpicked by Steve Bannon is now empowered to corrupt government data. More on that, we're back on the beat. Trump is continuing to not hire the best people. The administration is tapping a MAGA loyalist for the top job at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see him there, E.J. Antoni, Project 2025 contributor, an economist at the pro-Trump Heritage Foundation, who Steve Bannon urged Trump to nominate after Trump fired the previous jobs data chief because he didn't like the data, accusing her of manipulating stats without offering any evidence. Antoni has been a vocal critic of the agency and said this right before Trump fired the previous administrator.
Have we put in our own person into BLS? Is a MAGA Republican that President Trump knows and trusts? Are they running the Bureau of Labor Statistics yet, sir?
No, unfortunately, Steve, we still haven't gotten there. And I think that's part of the reason why we continue to have all of these different data problems.
Steve Bannon calling for a MAGA Republican to run the agency. But experts say the job is about instilling nonpartisan trust, which explains the instant backlash, including Barack Obama's top economist Jason Furman saying, quote, I don't think I have ever publicly criticized any presidential nominee before. But E.J. Antoni is completely unqualified to be BLS commissioner. He is an extreme partisan and does not have any relevant expertise. Today, Reuters reporting on worries among economists about the reliability of jobs numbers due to potential political interference and staffing cuts. Joining me now to discuss is Justin Wolfers, economist with the University of Michigan and host of the Think Like an Economist podcast. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start with this because this seems to be the basic thing to me. I don't think there are Democratic numbers. I don't think there are MAGA numbers. Aren't labor statistics just numbers? Tell us a little bit about what that job actually entails. I don't see why it's a partisan position.
Right. So let's try an analogy here. Say you wanted to figure out what the president's weight was. We could get a scale and we could put him on the scale and that would tell us in pounds. That'd be pretty good. And if it was a doctor, an honest doctor who read the scale, you'd know exactly what the president weighed. Now, here's the problem. What if I told you that Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary who has a tortured relationship with truth, was the one reading the scale? All of a sudden, I reckon that president's going to be about 100 pounds lighter. Now, in this case, It might mean he gets the wrong cholesterol drugs, but when it comes to the economy, it means that the folks at the Fed are driving blind. It means that businesses don't actually know which parts of the country are booming and which are in recession. It means job seekers don't know what occupations to join, and on and on and on it goes. It is just a number. This is a job that I want to be clear about this. It's the most important part of this. This is a job that has never been filled by ideologues. It's always been filled by number crunching nerds who understand all the wizardry of statistics, the complications, and how we can make data speak in a way that they tell the truth most clearly.
You know, Justin, this is the thing that gets me, to extend your metaphor about the scale. The worry is that Trump steps on the scale and Antoni and Pete Hegseth are holding his arms up so he appears to be a lot lighter than he actually is. What are the potential consequences of unreliable numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, both domestically and internationally?
Right. So these are data that are used for all sorts of things. Businesses use them to figure out where should I open my next branch. They use it to figure out whether they should be hiring or whether they should be contracting. The Federal Reserve uses it to decide whether to raise interest rates or lower them. Banks use it to decide whether to expand lending or whether it wouldn't be safe to do so. You and I might use it to figure out which occupations we should be directing our kids to be going into and so on. These are data that have already been collected. And all we need is to be told the truth in order to make the best possible decisions for our families, our businesses, and our government. Look, it's worse than you said, because even if Pete Hegseth isn't holding the president's arms, metaphorical arms here, the very suspicion that he might be is enough. I no longer believe what the scale says. This is a job that's always been occupied by a wonk because you want to eliminate any suspicion that the data is not worthwhile. And so the moment you allow the possibility of doubt, you've all of a sudden taken the hundreds of millions of dollars we, the taxpayers, have invested in these data, and you've made them a whole lot less valuable.
You know, I want to say this. There's a story now about Trump saying that Goldman Sachs should fire its economists who said tariffs would slow economic growth. You know, obviously this is a president who is allergic to the truth, but what's the impact, Justin, of also not only does the president seem to want to manipulate his own data, but he is now threatening, and we've seen him go through these threats, threatening economists that don't even work for the government. What can that do to our economy?
Let me look him right in the eye and say tariffs are going to raise inflation and slow economic growth. Come at me, brother. But this is actually more pernicious than that. What this is a president telling a bank on Wall Street who to hire as their chief economist. After he told Intel who to hire as their CEO. After he told Harvard what to put on their curriculum. After he told Coca-Cola what kind of sweetener to use in their drinks. This is command and control. This is a single man in a room deciding all the different levers about what should happen in the economy rather than letting individuals make their own choices and individual experts and businesses compete with each other in the market to produce the best possible goods at the best possible prices. This is central planning. This is the thing Reagan fought against. And it's a beautiful irony, Jason. You and I are on MSNBC right now arguing for market forces over this excess of central planning from an administration crazy on power.
I got to tell you, it is always clear when you explain things to us, and it always sounds great too. Justin Wolfers, thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Beat.
A pleasure, mate.
Still ahead, Trump's mishandling of FEMA is affecting communities like this one as they struggle to rebuild. But first, Obama's vision of America turned on its head as party power struggles escalate. More when we get back on The Beat.
Well, I say to them tonight, there is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America. There is not a Black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Barack Obama in 2004 with a vision of a united America. But now, Gallup surveys show that the two parties are more polarized than ever. And the Texas redistricting fight has escalated into a national brawl between red states and blue states.
If they show back up in the state of Texas, they will be arrested and taken to the Capitol.
We are talking about emergency measures to respond to what's happening in Texas, and we will nullify what happens in Texas.
They fled and went to leftist blue states that may be more aligned with their personal philosophy that is not welcome in the state of Texas.
We are at war. And that's why the gloves are off, and I say, bring it on.
This feud may only deepen existing divisions in this country. Right now, 40 states have governments controlled by one party or another, and the anxiety about where this all could lead was expressed in last year's thriller Civil War.
19 states have seceded. The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you?
Joining me now is David Daley, journalist and author who's written extensively about politics and voting rights. His latest book is Anti-Democratic: Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections. David, thanks for joining me this evening. I'm going to start with this. I'm a political scientist by training. I teach political journalism to students, and I've always been skeptical of the idea of purely red and blue states. I think there's a lot of purple in there, but they've been gerrymandered into red and blue states. Do you think that we have actually, does the data show that we are actually more ideologically polarized today, or is it simply the leadership of our country is more ideologically polarized and it's dragging people in their directions?
I think that we have been polarized by gerrymandering. We've been polarized by redistricting. We have 25 states that voted for Donald Trump 3 times. Those 25 states all have Republican governors, Republican state legislatures, and they have 50 U.S. senators. We have, in many ways, the exact opposite of what Barack Obama hoped for in that speech. And so much of it goes back to the question of redistricting. When Obama was elected in 2008, Democrats had a supermajority in the U.S. Senate, a huge advantage in the U.S. House. Republican strategists recognized that as historic as the 2008 election was, the 2010 election would be much more consequential. It was a census year, it was a redistricting year, and that if they were able to win trifecta control in purple states, and that's what they've taken over to really have the upper hand in redistricting, North Carolina, Ohio, Indiana, Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan. That's where the Republican gains on redistricting were made. So much of this stems from that strategy.
And a lot of the data shows that it was in 2012 where I think Democrats got over 1 million more votes, but ended up, losing seats when we had sort of our midterm elections and during the presidential election of 2012. How does that happen? So what is the process that Republicans have taken slowly over the last 50 years, 40 years, 15 years, 7 years to make sure that they can gerrymander out power despite, in some instances, not having the majority?
Republicans had a really sophisticated strategy heading into the 2010 midterms. And what they wanted to do, and Karl Rove outlined this in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that March. He said, the party that controls state legislatures can control Congress. And so Republicans had a strategy called Red Map, short for the Redistricting Majority Project. And what they set out to do was to control every seat at the table when it came to redistricting in 2011. This was focused really in purple states, in North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And as a result, you're absolutely right. In 2012, not only did 1.4 million more Americans prefer Democratic candidates than Republicans for the U.S. House. Republicans held a 234-201 advantage anyway. But all of these purple states that voted to re-elect Obama in 2012, Republicans took 64 of the 94 congressional seats from those states. That is how you can control this country from the minority through redistricting.
So, David, I'm looking down the road. We've got Abbott saying he's going to eliminate 5 Democratic seats in Texas. You've got the governor in South Carolina saying we're going to get rid of 1 district. You've got these sorts of plans happening. And then you've got Democratic governors saying, hey, we will do this in response. Play this out. Give me some back at the envelope math here. If we look at all the solidly blue states that don't have, independent electoral commissions, if all the blue states gerrymandered out Republicans and all the Republicans gerrymandered out the Democrats, who would basically end up winning? If there was an extreme gerrymander off, who ends up winning that contest in America?
Well, voters lose, first of all, but I think then Democrats lose as well. Democrats and Republicans could fight this off to a stalemate if this just stayed in Texas and California. And I think that this by no means would pass in California if it goes to the ballot, allowing the legislature to go ahead and gerrymander. But this is not going to stay in Texas. Republicans are going to move on to Ohio, where there's only a 4-year map in place, 2 Democratic districts there that they could wipe off. It's going to move to Florida, where Ron DeSantis has already said he's going to reopen these maps. 3 seats in South Florida, as well as Tampa and Orlando, that he's going to take a look at. This is going to go to Missouri, to Indiana. If Republicans really want to continue, they could go to Kentucky, to New Hampshire, to Kansas. The Supreme Court today is taking on this additional case. They're going to hear arguments October 15th on the Voting Rights Act case out of Louisiana. Majority-minority seats could allow Republicans to rip up maps next year across the South and destroy majority black seats in Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana. Democrats they just don't have a lot of room to go after California. New York, it's 2028 until the state constitution can be amended. Democrats have already pretty much maximized their gains in Illinois. The governor of Oregon has said that they're not going to touch this. Maryland attempted to do an 8-0 map. The state Supreme Court said no. Democrats are trying to talk tough here about bringing a gun to a gunfight. The trouble is they're out of ammo. They're out of targets. If Republicans want to push this advantage, they can do so.
They'll end up, yeah. David Daley, thank you so much for giving us raw data, even if it's sort of depressing news. Thank you for joining us this evening on The Beat.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, new worries about hurricane season under the Trump administration. When we're back on The Beat. Tonight, new scrutiny on the Trump administration's plans for FEMA as hurricane season begins. Last year, there were 24 major weather and climate-related disasters in the United States, each of which cost more than $1 billion in damages. Instead of preparing for this, Donald Trump is trying to defund FEMA, a judge recently blocking the administration from diverting $4 billion away from disaster prevention funds, as Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem have both called for completely eliminating FEMA. It comes as FEMA workers have been reassigned to work for ICE during hurricane season. All of this while Donald Trump plays politics with life and death matters, approving disaster aid for devastating flood in deep red Texas and rejecting aid requests for states with Democratic governors, including Maryland, Washington State, and North Carolina, where residents in remote, rural areas of the state are still recovering from the devastation of Hurricane Helene. Joining me now to discuss this is Andrew Aydin, a former aide to civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis. Aydin also co-authored Lewis's graphic novel memoir called March. Now he's working on the Appalachia Comics Project, raising awareness by creating a graphic history of Hurricane Helene through partnerships with local artists. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this evening on The Beat. Look, everyone knows that I'm a comic book fan, and I find them to be a great way to communicate. But tell us a little bit about this Appalachia Project. You had a write-up in Forbes talking about how this is uplifting Appalachia and also helping with Hurricane Helene.
Yeah, we took a terrible blow. And what scared me the most is once we got back online, because remember, we were completely cut off from the rest of the world for almost a week. No phone, no internet, no television. We get back online and we see the so much misinformation going around on the internet. And part of what we're trying to do is tell the story through comics. We're trying to give survivors like myself, my neighbors, my friends and colleagues, the opportunity to write comics about their experiences during Helene, so that people who didn't get the full truth understand what happened, and that people from Appalachia have the opportunity to give voice to their story. I mean, what we're dealing with out here is unprecedented still, and we're not getting the help we need. And the way we're doing this is that the survivors who write their comics, who write their stories, they get paid as the writers. And a lot of my colleagues who make comics for a living, they're donating their time and they're giving their labor free so that these survivors can get a little bit of help.
Andrew, first off, that's amazing work and gives people an opportunity to also make money talking about what they've suffered from. I want to point out here, the Trump administration, just as recently as last Friday, the Trump administration is delaying aid on hundreds of already approved projects in North Carolina. Are people in North Carolina aware of this? Are voters there aware of the fact that this administration that some of them voted for is now denying them the aid that they need to recover from these natural disasters?
I think some people are aware, but I don't think they have any idea the scope of it. I mean, I saw somewhere recently that only 6% of the cost of the disaster has been covered by the federal government. And if I recall from my days on Capitol Hill, that was usually somewhere between 50 and 70% of the cost covered by the federal government. So the gap we're talking about is tens of billions of dollars. And we're just starting to feel this in different ways. I mean, for instance, out here in Edneyville, where I live, this is the Apple Valley. We're all farmers. And we have something called the debris removal program. And it was supposed to clear debris around waterways and homes and structures that could be damaged because a tree is fallen but hasn't fallen all the way or something like that. When they came out to actually do it, we were informed that less was covered, that the federal government had mandated a change and that not all of the debris would be removed. And this complicates things in several ways. One, you've got people who have these piles and piles of drying and rotting wood that's going to be fuel come fire season. And two, you've got waterways that are going to be blocked. So the next time we have a flood or a storm, the floods are going to be even worse. These are investments that should be made now to prevent further damage in the future, but they're cutting back and they're just creating a problem that's going to get even worse.
Andrew, thank you so much for the work you do creatively and what you're doing in the community in North Carolina. Appreciate you coming on The Beat tonight.
No, thanks for having me, Jason. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. We'll be right back with one more thing.
Music he played made life work and made him a legend. Cool DJ Herc.
My back to school party that I gave, 1520 Cedric Avenue, August 11, 1973. That was the birth of hip hop.
At The Beat, we'd be remiss to not take note of a special birthday this week. Go hip hop, it's your birthday. 52 years ago, yesterday, a back-to-school party by DJ Kool Herc and his sister Cindy Campbell changed America. No one could have predicted that a small rec room in the Bronx would be the birthplace of hip-hop. 2 turntables and a microphone became the music of a generation. Today, hip-hop is a global industry influencing fashion, sports, food, and most importantly, politics, as hip-hop is often the anthem of the unseen and unheeded in America. Hip-hop is now older than Star Wars and just short of the median age in Congress. So let's pour one out for hip-hop and welcome the music of our youth to middle age. That does it for me. The weeknight is up next.